born and raised right here in San Diego. Never was a football fan. Never was a sports fan, really. My dad was. Grew up in first 10 years of my life right here in Rancho Penasquitos. Most people don't know that. I just gave you some information that a lot of people don't know, like what were you doing in Rancho Penasquitos? But that's where I was the first 10 years of my life, going to Lost Penn Elementary. Household was super chaotic. Mom and dad just constantly fighting, mostly just verbal, no physical. My mom was more physical than my dad was when she had just had enough. 10 years old, we moved from Rancho Penasquitos to Spring Valley. So Spring Valley at 10 years old, up until that time, like I was super, not protected, but let's just say my music was, I couldn't listen to certain music, certain rap music. They monitored my upbringing. So I think a lot of the seeds that my mom was planting in me then are what uprooted later on in life, and we'll get there. She used to have those plastic play school tables, for kids. She used to have one right, and as soon as you walked in the door, it was right there in the kitchen door area. So as soon as I got out of school every day, she made me sit down and what she called relearning. So everything, she wanted to know everything I was taught in school, so she can correct where she needed to correct what the teachers were teaching me, and also give me her version of what really happened. So at a little age, I'm 5 years old, learning about what Christopher Columbus really did. So she was putting these things in me, instilling positive things inside of me from a kid, and kind of made me a fighter. 10 years old, moved to Spring Valley. She put me in private school. I was in a private school, community school, somebody she trusted. But she didn't know. When I went to that private school, they were teaching us how to fight. They were teaching us manhood stuff that they didn't tell her, and I didn't tell her. There's barely any education involved there, but I didn't say anything because I thought it was cool, and there was some cool older kids there. 12 years old, something she had to pay for the school, couldn't afford it anymore, had me go to a middle school in San Diego, southeast San Diego, called Bale Middle School. 12 years old, it was, I was born in the 80s. I'm 37 years old. I was born in 81. So by that time, it's the early 90s, and at that time, the gang culture was really, really prevalent. The music reflected that. That's kind of like my whole mentality that was the cool thing to do at that time. All of the friends and peers and older people, that's what they were doing, was they were involved in gang activity. So quickly, football went away. And I picked this up. So I picked this up, right? This was, we'll say, the flag of my neighborhood where I was at. So I latched on to this. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. Dad was out of the house by 12. He was gone. Mom just had enough. They were all the chaotic fighting. He finally leaves. What I didn't realize, I used to steal from my mom, like money. But I would steal money from her and buy it. I was still a kid, attracted to this. So I'm stealing money and buying comic books, buying turtles, kid stuff. Had a turtle farm in the backyard. So this was yeah, don't tell anybody. So these are, just letting you know who I was as a child, but still mixed and still going to here because my atmosphere directed me here. So the kid stuff is fading, and this is getting more serious. And I kind of got jolted into the street life one day. Me and my mom, she raised me. I have an older sister who has cerebral palsy, so she was dependent upon my mom very much so. It's not severe, but she has it. Couldn't go to regular school. And she had, at this point in time, when we moved to Spring Valley, she had taken on 2 of my girl cousins, one that was the same age as me and one newborn. My mom had to take them on. Their mom was on crack. As you know, 80s horrible crack epidemic. And I remember being in the car. My mom had to go to a crack house and rescue the baby from there and brought her home. So she started raising her from our household. One day, walking home from school, my mom usually picked us up, but she didn't pick us up one day. I get to the house and there's one of those bolt locks on the door, meaning you can't come in and no one else can, right? Rent wasn't paid. Had no idea what was going on. And I'll say from 12 years old to 14 and a half, we were on the streets, homeless, living any place that we could stay, any friend's house that would let us take a couch, take a floor until they got tired of us. And we bounced to probably about 5 different houses. We were never technically had to sleep outside. My mom was resourceful, and she kept friends good enough till we had temporary lodging. But that's living in that kind of atmosphere. I would end up going back to school, and I was now as an older man and reflecting back, I realized I was taking what was happening to me at home and putting it in my behavior in school. Stopped going to class. Me and a group of other kids, called them the Lost Boys, we were all just roaming around school, breaking windows. Teachers were scared of us. I had straight F's and D's throughout my whole junior high school time I was there, and they continued to pass me every semester, right? Like, I would never go to class, but I would pass. And just now looking back, like, why did I pass? Why were they allowing me to pass? It was kind of, they knew where I was headed. That guy's headed to prison, and they didn't want me there. They were scared of me. They didn't want me there. I didn't want to be there, but that was my only outlet of expressing what my situation, my home life was like. Barely eating. Moms, there was no food, no income coming in. I used to steal from Jack in the Box right there on Federal. They would pass food out the window, the drive-through, and I would be hiding, and then I run and I grab it. And I did that I like 4 times. They never caught on, really. I don't know. I don't know. It worked for me. But what I did with that food, whatever it was, I brought it back to my little cousins, my sister. Mom's was just not around. But I didn't know where she was. She was just not around. I never really thought about where's my mom right now. But I felt like a man being able to bring back that food to feed my siblings, right? Every time. It wasn't even about me being hungry. At one point, I remember I tried to call my dad. I don't know where he was. Asked him if he could send us some money for some food, or just send us some money so we could help our situation. And he had just told me straight up that just pretend you're not my son anymore. Okay? Don't call me again. Pretend you're not my son anymore. I was, at that point, it wasn't no cry moment. It was pretty much F you. Okay? And I hung up. And I never really looked back at him as being a father type since then. I think that was this. I ended up getting kicked out of school. I never finished the 8th grade. So 8th grade at that junior high school, I got in a fight. It was super gang activity. We were fighting every day. Gang members were coming from, older gang members from high school were coming up. People that weren't in school were coming up to the school. This is junior high school. It was like a movie. And we had like super gang feuds. And I got in a fight and they kicked me out. So for the rest of that time, like, it was like the middle of that 8th grade year. Like, my mom never put me back in school. It was like to stay at home. She was doing her thing, which I come to find out later, my mom had become addicted to crystal meth. And I touched on it earlier, but when I used to steal from my mom, I was young, and I remember I used to reach in her pocket to look for money, and I put out a little baggie of some crystal-like substance, but I didn't know what it was at that point. I've never been exposed to crystal. I'd never seen it, so I didn't know. I just put it back, and I felt weird, but I never addressed it again. But I found out from other loved ones that my mom was on crystal, and that's why she was just not around. It was like pretty much fend for yourself at this time. So that summer of me being kicked out the 8th grade, I went to camp. My auntie took us to camp to the Redwood Forest up in Northern California. When I opened up my backpack, or my luggage, there was a 1/4 pound of marijuana in my bag. I didn't know it was there. My situation, and it was her way of helping me out. It didn't take me long. You know, I knew enough of the streets by then, so it was quickly, marijuana became my sale item. And when I started 9th grade, from there on, when I went to 9th grade, I already had pre-rolled joints in my little cassette case. I was a young entrepreneur at that point in time. And I was $5 joints as soon as I got to 9th grade. Anybody who needed weed, I was that guy. And I would take the money, and the money was never about me buying clothes or anything like that. I take the money and I just give it to my mom. and it was a decent amount of money sometimes, but she would never ask me where I got it from. She knew I didn't go to school, go to work or anything like that. She never questioned where that money came from. So I just continued to do that, and weed became my thing. At that point in time, I met who was my best friend at the time, and he kind of started talking me out of this gangbanging stuff. And saying, girl, you don't get girls like that. That's old school. We don't do gangbanging activity around here. You need to be a pretty boy. Pretty boys was the thing. We're talking, this is 1996. I'm in the 9th grade at Helix High School. And this friend of mine really got me out of that gang activity and took me shopping for the first time. That time I'm wearing gangster attire. It was Dickie suits and t-shirts and Pro Club t-shirts and Chuck Taylors. I was the stereotypical black gangster. Carrying these every day to school. Red shoelaces, red shoes. Helix High School was not used to anything like me when I was there. That was not my atmosphere. Mom got us in a house by that time. It kind of got us in the house with her and her boyfriend, who I didn't know what he did, but I come later on to find out he used to fly pounds and pounds of marijuana across the country, and that's how we started getting money and got our first house. So from that pretty boy lifestyle, met this group of friends. My one friend, the best friend I'm telling you about, he introduced me to his friends, 2 of them. His mom was a foster parent, took in 2 kids herself, took in multiple kids herself. But the kids around our age, we all became friends and kind of merged into this clique, this crew. I was still the weed man, but we had merged into this era, what we call the clique era in San Diego. It was multiple, I've counted at least 100 different crews and cliques that broke off of the major gangs. There's about 5 or 6 major gang sets in San Diego. But at this time, young men and women around my age had started breaking off of those and started to form our own thing. Now, mind you, looking back, we're the generation that's kind of slightly under the major gang era. We had parents, most of our parents were on crack. We've seen that. So we've seen the detriments of crack cocaine. We've seen the detriments of gang activity. By that time, I had lost multiple friends to murder already at 15 years old. I'd already lost associates. So we knew that wasn't an avenue for us. And then it only took somebody it wasn't hard for him to sway me away from it. I just naturally didn't even want that. That was more of me rebelling at that time. So when this whole pretty boy thing, now we're wearing Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, Polo. I'm shaving my legs like it's a pretty boy. I'm telling you, we just wanted to be like fly and pretty. It was this mentality. And mind you, around this time, the music we were listening to majorly before that was mostly pushing a gangster, drug dealer sound. And we would joke about it, and now just from dissecting that time span right there, we were saying gangster rap had died, and a new era of music had entered, and I called it the bling bling era. Like, no more was it the low riders and the Dickies and the gangsters talking about drugs and shooting people. The music had merged into like just money and diamonds, and you had the Cash Money Clique and Master P and all these dudes that now were just talking about money and had big rims and foreign cars and Mercedes Benzes. It was no longer the old 67 Impalas and 6.4. That was gone. So now with that major influence of music and watching BET, watching MTV, seeing this image out there, our minds, I noticed, started merging to money being a necessary item. And we're all impoverished. All of my friends, we grew up in poverty, different situations. Most of my friends in worse childhoods than mine, and including a couple that just don't even know their parents. We needed money. And at that point in time, we called this I call it the juicing era. We used to say we were juicing girls. We'd get money. They would pay for our lunch. They'd buy our clothes. We didn't even really want to be around a girl unless she was paying for something. We did not know what the word or term pimp was. I had heard it, but that was not the case with us then. It was just a girl could not necessarily be around us unless it was a financial benefit. And that was the mentality. And then I'll go back to the music we were listening to, it only further enhanced that. It made that mentality the way to be. And the girls weren't against it. They were willingly giving their money to be around us. That wasn't, we were like in a searching stage, like what are we about to do? Because even at 15, by this time already, I'm 15, but I'm thinking like I'm way older. I'm thinking like I'm in my 20s. 15, I pretty much moved out of my house. Living with friends. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her dad worked that night, so I'd go to her house, sleeping at her house at night, and going to the 9th grade from her house in the morning. I was kind of an adult. So football was out, sports was out, gangbanging was out. Now it's time to get money, but how are we gonna do it? What are our options? I'm selling weed, and that's okay, but I'm in San Diego, everybody sells weed at that time. Weed is nothing. So I need some serious money. So kind of merged into my next era, which was, we tried this out. And it's baking soda. Just make sure y'all know that. It's pure uncut baking soda. He was looking at me. You might have a buzzer under the table, but no. I do this because I want some people. Everybody has different backgrounds and where they came from. So I want to physically show you at 12 years old, 15 years old, what I saw as my options, and all of them were getting alleviated. Football, gangbanging, selling drugs. We started trying to sell crack cocaine. But within a week, one of my best friends, he got busted, sold undercover. We didn't know what we were doing. No one really taught us this. And that kind of scared us. He caught a juvenile charge and we're like, nope, we're not doing that. So I stuck with my weed. But let this be the drugs, gangbanging, and sports, which I'm small and I have no talent of sports. So that was out. We're getting money from girls. Until I was probably like 16, in the middle of my 16-year age, 10th grade. And I remember coming home or going to my friend's house, or my best friend's house, and HBO had a lovely special on for us, right? It's called Pimps Up, Hoes Down.
Nice.
So we go there, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Pimps Up, Hoes Down is playing on HBO for our young minds, right? And for the first time in my life that I can remember, I finally felt and thought I seen an option for something that I could do as a black man that I could succeed at. You know, people ask me all the time and they say, but we're in America, the land of opportunities, the land of you can do whatever you want here. And all that's true. But if I don't see that, know that, and in my community, all I see is one other thing. There's an American pie that I know exists, but all I get is the American crumb. So, but I want that. I need money. I want money. And here goes American Pimp too, but here goes Pimps Up, Hoes Down, where at the time it looked like men that were happy on there. With girls and money, and at the time it looked like girls on there that were happy doing what they were doing. At the time they looked happy. You know, I've revisited that documentary now recently to rewatch that, and everybody looked miserable. But at my 15-year-old eyes, they looked happy. So we mimicked them. We learned from them. We developed idols from those guys that were in that documentary. We used to mock their lines, repeat them with each other. It became cool. And I don't know what was happening around that era and time, but the music started reflecting that. The same guys I was hearing and seeing in that documentary, I would hear sound clips of them in people's songs, people that I'd already respected as rap artists and looked up to as rap artists. I'm seeing them in their videos. You have all kind of pimp songs coming out, and it was just a whole pimp era. And pimping and prostitution era. I thought it at the time, maybe it was just me and my friends, but everybody kind of just started merging into this lifestyle. It was at that time seemed like the coolest thing and the only option for us to get involved in. Girls got involved in it. I used to hear girls talk about other girls that weren't prostituting or escorting or stripping or some sort. Guys would talk about you if you weren't in the game of some sort. If you had a girlfriend, it was bad. It had become a bad thing. So amongst my subculture and where I'm at, that was the way. It was the coolest thing you could do. And once you got that first little bit of money, there was no turning back. It was now you're chasing this carrot for years and years. And I was on El Cajon Boulevard, first time in my life. I'm a kid, 16, 17 years old, right here with my friends on this blade, learning, observing, and I got hooked. But honestly, I don't even want it to sound like I was just, even as a kid, got into just being this big bad pimp, because I wasn't. Those core roots and those things that my mom instilled in me as a kid, I was never a bad human being inside. And it didn't feel right a lot of times. But like me and probably all my other friends, we wouldn't say what wasn't feeling right inside of us because you'd be chastised, you'd be talked about. So we went further and further in. Sometimes working jobs, sometimes not. And it was a chaotic period. 16 years old, one of my friends that didn't get into the lifestyle, and he was stuck in gangbanging, he was murdered. And that was my first close friend that was murdered, first person in the casket I seen, had to kiss his forehead. It was the first person I had experienced that close to me that had got killed. And that really further turned us away from that, and our only option, what it seemed like at that time, was pimping. And just to be clear, because I want to talk about this later, but I am not, in no way do I ever want to come across like I'm making an excuse for what I have done. I have damaged personally, I've damaged a lot of lives. I have influenced a lot of lives for negative activity, male and female. Even if I wasn't the one that turned the girl out, I may have introduced her to somebody who did, or even if I just introduced the game to her myself and she went down later on. I'm personally guilty for damaging lives. And I know there's a thin line between a reason and an excuse. And I don't want to be crossing that line like I'm making an excuse, but honestly, there are reasons and that led me down the path that I was on. And I don't want to excuse those. I'm owning up for those. And for many years, I tried to escape and go into the military. I was 18 years old. Stuff wasn't working out right for me. I did complete high school. I did my junior year, my senior year. I had my own apartment. I finished high school, conned my way through it. I wasn't really going to school, but I was smart enough and gifted enough to get good grades. Art, 2 periods. Cooking, 2 periods. At one point in time, I was on the African American honor roll. I'm like, hey, I'm at school high every day, selling liquor, selling weed, and trying to sell women. So I graduated, and then so we lost our apartment. I ended up having to stay at my grandmother's house, and I was like, I got to make an escape out of here. A lot of people around me were dying, going to jail, and where I'm from, if you make it to 18, it's like a blessing. You're lucky if you make it to 18. So I called myself joining the Air Force. But even when I was in the Air Force, the streets had my mind so much. I was in the Air Force trying to turn out girls in the Air Force, and successful. Calm my way out of there, and I was always chasing money. I never really even claimed or accepted the word pimp, because I just liked money, and where we were from, if you pimp, that's what you did. But I would sell weed, I would do whatever, white collar crime, whatever. I would do whatever it was to make money. I was chasing money. Did 3 years in a federal penitentiary, but that was for selling marijuana. sending packages. Kind of sum up, I would do everything I could to get money. I didn't care about who I hurt. I didn't care about the risk. I would do whatever I had to do to make money. And like I said, I've hurt a lot of people along the way. I was hurt myself along the way. When I went to prison 2 months before I came home from prison, my very best friend, I called him my brother because we were closer than brothers, you know. So close, if I didn't have any boxers and he had some dirty ones, I'd wear them. You know, we were close. I don't know how more descriptive to get. I'm serious. But he took care of me the whole time I was in prison. He used to drive up to the jail. He couldn't even come see me, but he couldn't come visit me, but he would drive up to the jail and knew where the window was where I was at just to stand out there and watch me. We were close. So 2 months before I got released, he was murdered on the 163 freeway by 4 kids that were on a shooting spree. They were 14, 15, 17, and 19. And they shot up a caravan of my friends that were pimping. They were leaving the Padre Gold, and they murdered my brother and shot the passenger, who's a friend of mine also. So that was kind of, you know, because what question I get often is what made you stop that activity? What made you stop pimping or whatever it was? And I'll say that was the start of it. Although, like, pimping and what I hear from a lot of my sister homegirls that were in the game, it's like a drug addiction where you can't just necessarily quit cold turkey. I was phasing out, so I would work, but as soon as the job fell off, I knew how to get money that way, so I would go back that way. I'd go back, and it was not hard to get a girl. I've never, for the record, I've never put my hands or had to hit a woman in my life. I was what they called pretty much a businessman pimp. I would break down with a piece of paper and a pen, and I'd write out a game plan for a girl that was in my same situation, that wanted some money too. And I would draw it out, and if she said no, she wasn't with it, then she wasn't with it, and I went on to the next. But many of those girls I introduced that to, I know later on entered the game, and I feel guilty for that too. Because had I not entered their life and had brought that to them, maybe they would not have gone down those paths and got stuck as well. And what ended up just getting me out years later is I just got tired. I was a lucky one. Nothing really tragic just hit me and said, Armand, get out. I just got out because it's a headache. And it's not a good life. It's not a, as much as we coerced each other, the men. Like, we would say lines and we would listen to the music, and it was almost like a constant brainwashing we would do of each other. We created a God beside God, this pimp God that was blessing us when we would come up on money, because inside we knew that was not the real God. We knew God was not with the actions and the stuff that we were doing. So we had to create another God just to be okay with what we were doing. And it was a constant brainwashing, not just brainwashing the women that we may have had, but brainwashing each other to make this lifestyle okay, which totally is not. And I finally I was in Arizona at that time, and I had 3 girls with me. And really, at that time, I had just stopped, and I was working at a restaurant, and a girl who's a friend of mine to this day is the one that got me to get back in with her and talked me into getting in the game with her. And then suddenly now it's 3 girls. And me and her, it was a bad situation. She had her baby's father who was getting out of jail, and I caught her sending pictures to him, and at that point in time, as the man in this relationship with her, I was supposed to be mad at her. We were supposed to fight, argue, whatever the case may be, but something inside of me, I was just like, I don't even have the energy for this no more. Approaching 30 years old, and I thought, like, the same energy I'm putting into this negative activity, if I put it in myself, I'll be way better off. And it was almost, honestly, at that time, it was like she wanted me to fight with her, but I was just through. I was just done. So I stopped, and I've never gone back. It's been temptations. There's been people that have came to me to get back involved, but I didn't. I'd rather be broke than get money that way. And it wasn't like my mind just shifted. Now I just knew I was just the stuff I did was bad. But it took growth. It took really these past 4 years of just even being involved in this advocacy, sex trafficking, survivor advocacy, and being around and hearing other people's stories, because not everybody's story is the same, although this umbrella is put over all human sex trafficking as if it's just one issue. And everybody's issue, everybody's way they got in, everybody's lifestyle while they were in is different.